What's going on?
Everybody, mic's on. All right, welcome everyone to this planning board meeting, Wednesday, December 19th. First item on our agenda is a roll call. We've got Lisa Buck, we've got Krista Schwinzer, myself, Phil Ruck, we've got Jeremy Chubbick, Dave Thompson, Mr. Beckett, and Mike Costello down the end there. So next up on the agenda is acceptance of the agenda. I have a motion.
So moved.
Good.
Seconded.
Very good. Any discussion, comments, edits? Hearing none. All those in favor of the agenda as provided. Next up, approval of the minutes of July 18th, 2018. We have a very good summary that was provided in our packets. Can I have a motion for that?
So moved.
So one correction.
Could I have a second? We have you got that, Mr. Beckett? All right, comments, questions, yes?
So even though I was not there, I think there's a misprint in it.
Yep.
In section 7, it says John Beckett moved to adjourn the May 16th planning board meeting, and the May 16th planning board meeting was adjourned. I think that was supposed to be the July 18th meeting.
That
I think.
That's right to me. Good catch. I looked at that and I read right over it. There's one edit. Any others? I guess with that correction, all those in favor of the minutes as amended? Very good. Next up, we have new business this evening. First up is a proposed land use ordinance amendment to sections 18-128, 18-126, 18-31. Is that 131 or 31? I'm assuming 31 is correct. If these are.
I believe it's 31, it's the definitions.
Okay. 18-127, 18-168, 18-169, 18-177, 18-206, 18-210, and 18-106 to implement standards for parcels located in the C2 district with frontage along Park Street, as well as better aligning several traffic and access management standards with those of the Maine Department of Transportation. So before we have a presentation, I just want to fill in the board members. We did have a workshop a month ago, and Kyle gave us a very thorough presentation with Evan's support on the proposed land use ordinance. So we did provide, we had an extensive review, provided comment, and they've come back to us with some changes. But I just wanted to let board members know that weren't able to attend that we did have at least 5 people here anyways, and had quite a thorough review. So hopefully we don't have to backtrack as much. Certainly questions are welcome, but just wanted to give you a heads up on what happened. So with that, Kyle, can you give us an update presentation? I know the revised pack, the ordinance was.
So if it's, I don't know what the board feels about this, but I talked with Evan about possibly briefly going through the presentation you saw last time for the board members who weren't here and also for.
Yes. Very good. Yep.
So I mean, I could kind of provide some visual aids before we get into discussing the.
Yeah. Is it the entire presentation or an abbreviated one?
I can move quickly.
That sounds like a good plan. Yep.
Okay, so, hi everyone, my name is Kyle Drexler, I'm the town planner. Okay, so this is just a presentation to kind of provide some visual aid for the proposed amendments to kind of better illustrate and give a picture of what the concept and theory is behind some of the ideas. Jumping right in the red section, that's kind of our focus area, the C2 district of Park Street. These standards are only impacting the parcels that actually front along Park Street. And some of the other standards dealing with curb cuts and driveway width are townwide standards. But as far as the setback standard, which is the major thing being changed and proposed here, that's dealing solely in this section of Park Street. So the town had a transportation study done fairly recently, and 3 recommendations came out of that. The one we're talking about here is the third bullet, the changes to the land use ordinance, in hopes to better manage access to and from Park Street and also encourage more human scale development, making it a more comfortable space to walk, to bike, and for even people who drive to the area, for the students who now there's a lot more apartment housing. So, kind of going off that, one of the major goals is to make Park Street a connector rather than a divider. As it stands, you have a lot of student housing on one side of the street and the university on the other side. And what this would do is hopefully make the corridor a more comfortable place, a safer place for people to travel through instead of trying to get around. So to act more as a bridge between the two sections, a connector rather than a barrier. Again, developing and setting the foundation for more human scale development for people on the corridor, kind of making the most out of complete street principles. That's talking about bike lanes and more crosswalks and all those pedestrian and bike friendly amenities that will be better served by some of the standards proposed here. And the last one, creating an outdoor room effect, which is what the main setback standard addresses, bringing the buildings closer to the right of way to create a closer and more comfortable kind of feel with the buildings acting as walls on the street. So just quickly, this is Mill Street, what our downtown looks like. This is just to provide an image of the density level in a downtown. Versus out on Main Street here, you have a 30-foot setback, and it provides still a comfortable walking experience, but there's a little more space out in front of the buildings. You have enough space for a vegetated buffer area, but there isn't a lot of room for a lot of parking out front of the buildings that you might see on Stillwater Ave or somewhere like that. And this ratio that you see at the bottom there is talking about the ratio between the height of the building and the distance from the building to the center line of the street. So in the downtown, you have this 1-to-1 ratio where you have 25 feet of building height and 25 feet to the center line. On Main Street, right outside here, it's more of a 1-to-3 ratio, which is a comfortable ratio for pedestrians and people walking on the corridor. So some of our current standards that would go unchanged, keeping the same building footprint, the idea of having pitched roofs and residential style siding. So it's not really changing the look of the buildings or any design standards that we currently have in place. Some of the things that are proposing to be changed, the front yard setback is the major one. Currently, there's just a 20-foot minimum. The proposed change would have a 10-foot minimum and a 25-foot maximum. What this essentially does is makes it impossible, really, to have any parking in front of the building. The parking for these developments would then be shifted to the rear and the side of the building to create better access, safer access for people walking to business off the street. That being said, there is this incentive. There's a couple ways. The one mentioned here is, if you go up in building height, you can move the building back to a farther setback. So you're still maintaining the ratio that we talked about of building height to street center line. And that would allow for at most one row of parking out front. So if you had a maybe 2-floor or 3-floor building and you really wanted that parking out front, that would be something you could take advantage of. Again, limiting the width of driveways, recognizing the idea of service roads, which we can get into a little later. But really, I just want to use this presentation to show the idea of this outdoor room and why bringing the setback closer kind of creates a better space on the street for people to walk around. So, you have 3 design elements here that are kind of the keys to outdoor rooms: buildings closer to the right-of-way, limiting parking in the front of buildings, and creating comfortable pedestrian streets. So you can see on the street you have bike lanes with proper buffering for those bike lanes, good lighting, shade trees, all things that these standards don't directly address, but they kind of lay the foundation for those things to happen sometime down the line and to get the most out of those things. So, bringing buildings closer to the right-of-way, you can see by the rectangle there, the fronts of the buildings act as the walls of the room. The kind of tree canopy and the roofs act as the ceiling feel, and the street acts as the floor. The whole idea is to just bring it closer and to make people feel more secure, like they're walking in a room, even though it's still outside. It's a pretty common urban design principle. This isn't really a new idea that's being come up with. It's just trying to better utilize the space that's there. And again, this doesn't affect any existing buildings on Park Street. It's for new development and perhaps if there is some redevelopment of an existing structure. So again, this new setback standard, bringing the buildings closer to the right-of-way, it's not aiming to create a second downtown like is pictured on the left. That's not the density level that is meant to happen in the commercial 2 district. It's more designed to kind of create what you see out here, where there's still a setback. It's easy for people to get from the sidewalk to the business or building, but there just isn't a lot of parking and obstacles for pedestrians and cyclists to get to between the sidewalk and the business. So principle 2 was limiting off-street parking in the front of buildings. So this, image just kind of illustrates, what that might look like. You can see the right building, because of their height increase going up to 2 floors, they were able to increase their setback a little, and that allows for the 1 row of parking out front. But the majority of parking then would be to the back and side of the building. And again, just creating a safer environment in the front towards the right-of-way. Really, it's an aim to kind of dissuade the kind of development on the left and kind of encourage that parking towards the rear kind of atmosphere that's pictured there. And the last principle is just creating pedestrian comfort and encouraging the complete street ideas, the bike lanes, the good crosswalks, ADA accessible, good lighting. Again, the standards don't directly talk about any of those things, but creating that outdoor room effect with the development kind of creates an environment that's more comfortable for pedestrians. And this is kind of like a chicken and egg thing. When you create a place better suited for pedestrians, it's easier to encourage some of those amenities being put into place. And as you might know, Park Street isn't exactly a small neighborhood street. It's not Mill Street where the traffic is going really slow and one way. It's a bigger street that a lot of people use to get through. But just showing that those kinds of amenities like bike lanes and things like that can be used on larger scale streets and still be effective. So, this is all really in an effort to encourage that sort of development down the line. Okay, So that's just a review of kind of the presentation we had last time and the intent behind some of these standards.
Very good. Thank you. Before I open up the public hearing so we can get comments from you folks, do want to open it up to the board if there's any questions on what he presented, any of the material. Very good. I'm going to open up the public hearing and invite people to step up to the mic if you would state your name so that we can have you on the record and whether you have concerns or comments. All right. I'm going to leave the public hearing open. Kyle, can you summarize what, the points that the board made the last time and how you clarified things? Just a quick summary.
There's no mic here, so.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, so I think the main points last time that the board made was, one, addressing the issue of complexity when reading through this language. It's a lot of technical information. It can be hard for even staff to digest, let alone developers or residents or whoever is looking at it to try to understand. So one thing was, kind of simplifying a few areas, clarifying a few things. One way in which we attempted to do that was to provide a visual aid in the new version that kind of illustrates the idea of the incentive approach of building higher to get a further setback. When you read through something like that, it can be a little confusing. So hopefully with that in place, that makes it a little easier. I believe also the board last time, we talked about kind of what the planning board was actually legally allowed to do when it came to more subjective situations. As far as if there's an existing building, but they add on just simply a minor addition to the building, where does that line go as far as they have to abide by the standard, or what can the planning board actually do as far as forcing them to abide by that standard? So I think some of that was cleaned up as well. And I think the last thing was the irregularly shaped lots. That was another thing that was mentioned. Previously, there was a graphic example of that, and it kind of added a length to the amendment that may not have been useful in that many scenarios. So I think some of that was shortened up and clarified a little better.
I mean, it was a very technical document for those that weren't able to attend. And, I think the clarifications worked, that read quite a bit better.
Mm-hmm.
So last time, and I just want to ask the board's opinion on this. So last time we went through every single section. We carved it up, provided comment, but I'm not sure that we need to walk through or go through that entire exercise this evening. So what I was wondering is, you talked to us about what the board asked and what you changed, but there was a couple of key concepts. I think the presentation highlighted a lot of it and what we're trying to get out of this, but there's things like service roads and some key things that were added I think might be useful for both the audience and board members to hear again. Just maybe a couple of the key
points.
Yeah, that you really didn't cover. You mentioned service roads in your presentation, but I thought that's a newer concept for the town.
Yeah, let me just get there real quick. So the idea of service roads was mentioned in the presentation. And this is, well, it's on page 7 of mine. It might be slightly different on yours. In section 18-127, the curb cut section, a couple pages in number 5, letter F. So where the Orono Comprehensive Plan or other plan adopted by the town council recommends a service road as alternative shared access for 2 or more lots or structures, or where an approved subdivision plan provides for such a service road, the applicant shall provide for access to the service road and, as may be required by the planning board as part of the approval of a site plan or subdivision plan, share in the construction or cost of construction of the portion of the service road on which it has frontage. So a service road, to kind of take a step back, the idea of it is, you have Park Street, which is the main road, and then you have the businesses. A service road would usually run behind the businesses to kind of take some of the pressure, the vehicular pressure, off of Park Street or whatever the main road was in the whatever location you were in. So, that transportation plan that the town had done, one of the key things it was focusing on was ways to reduce the pressure on the corridor. And service road would be one of those ways. And so to have it kind of have these new developments provide access to a future service road is now a piece of this, and service roads become something, a definition in our ordinance that is actually recognized and can be further explored later down the line.
I think we talked about an example is the kind of the start of the service road. One of the projects this board reviewed was the Edge, right? And there was a connection between the Orchard Trails Drive and did it go all the way through? I'm trying to recall to to Washburn. So that was the start of a service road. And then I guess part of our discussion, which would seem quite interesting, is that perhaps, again, this is a long-term plan. This is one step in the process, but to be able to connect all of those, perhaps student houses so that all the pressure doesn't go to Park Street. That was an interesting idea. I think many of you recognize that this is very common down in like Texas and other places that I haven't been. So, Brewer has some service roads as well. So good concept. But any other points? I'm just trying to think, those that were at the workshop, things that jumped out at you that he might not have covered in the presentation.
Yeah, remember the length of the wall without a window or a door?
Oh, yes. Yeah. There were some standards about just talking about the length of a building wall or something like that, as Mike pointed out. So it just highlighting that just breaks up, in terms of access to buildings, and breaks up that space. You had a good summary of that.
Yeah, Evan Rickert, I've been
You look familiar. Yeah.
still doing some planning work for the town. Yes, the current there is a current standard that in the C2 district that there can't be blank walls. A blank wall is described as a distance now, I think, of 50 feet currently, without any feature like a window or an articulation or a door, some architectural feature that would break up that blank wall. Blank walls are just one of the most unfriendly pieces of an urban landscape. And so a lot of ordinances that pay attention to urban design in Maine and elsewhere have some standards that discourage blank walls. 50 feet's a long blank wall, and as we looked at some examples of design and so forth, we changed the 50 feet to 25 feet. So the blank wall, because a 50-foot blank wall could be an entire width of a building if it was situated sideways. And so you don't want that blank wall. 25 feet, every 25 feet, there'd have to be some sort of window or architectural feature or door, something that communicates with the street. So that's there. The one thing I wanted to, Kyle touched on it, but I wanted to make sure that the board, one of the changes that was made when we met in workshop, we had just received, so we had asked for some advice from legal counsel about the ability of the planning board to go through a waiver process, because we know this can't be a one size fits all. There's just too much variation on what people might want to do or need to do in the corridor. And so we wanted to give the planning board some authority to waive standards under certain circumstances. And so we got some legal advice on that. And after we digested that following the meeting, we did simplify quite a bit. It's section, it's on page 2 in my copy, section 18-128, which are the design standards that talk about the setback. But if you go to paragraph B1, Romanet 2, it's the little 2 I's there on page 2, where it starts with consistent with section 18-303. This all has to do with nonconformance, because actually, you know, as we talked about, this corridor is not wildly out of alignment with what Kyle has described. And it's partly because this corridor was never developed as a big suburban strip, because the traffic wasn't there to justify it. The market wasn't there to justify it. Things have changed with the introduction of over 2,000 student beds in that corridor. So most of the buildings that are built there probably don't fully comply with these standards, but they're also not wildly off from them either. It still has some of that the leftovers of when that part of Route 2 was somewhat more of a country highway connecting Orono to Old Town. Nevertheless, a lot of the buildings would be non-conforming. So what do you do when one of those buildings wants to simply expand, or, you know, add an accessory building and so forth? Well, there's a matter of practicality of what can be, you know, how can you get to a 25-foot maximum setback if you're already at 40 feet and you want to put a, you know, 1,000 square foot addition on. So this was all meant to deal with that. And so we had gone through this question of, well, can the planning board waive things? We really simplified it and dialed it back. So I think it's worth reading it just so you understand. And if you have any comments on it, or if the public has any comments on it, they can understand, because I think this would be not an uncommon situation that would come up. So consistent with section 18-303, subsections A and C of this ordinance, which is the nonconformance part of the ordinance, existing nonconforming structures or portions thereof may be reconstructed, replaced, and or expanded, so long as that reconstruction, replacement, or expansion does not increase the nonconformity. That would be the current standard in any case. And further, is brought into compliance with the standards contained in the subsection to the greatest extent practicable, as determined by the planning board. In making its determination of practicability, the planning board shall consider factors such as the distance at which the existing nonconforming structure is set back from Park Street, the size of the proposed reconstruction, replacement, or expansion. If it's an expansion, the proposed use of the expansion, and for example, if it was a utility purpose, you know, that was going to house heating equipment or freezer in the case of a grocery store or something, that would be something that's not important to be close to the road. If it's a retail shop where you want a lot of people entering, coming and going, that'd be a different matter. And any physical or natural limitations to bringing the structure closer to the maximum setback line. To the extent that the reconstruction, replacement, and or expansion cannot meet the maximum yard depth standard, the plan shall include treatments of the yard area such as landscaping, pedestrian circulation, and limited parking between the building and Park Street that create a safe and attractive environment for pedestrians and other users of Park Street. So you're still trying to get to the idea that this is a corridor that is friendly to multiple ways of travel. But really you're allowing non-conforming buildings to expand and enlarge.
Right. And how it's always happened, I think staff involvement in an early level, just to talk about obviously all the options, so that when we get to the board, that some of that.
Yeah, there would always be that. Yes. In the end, it's the planning board's got some room for judgment here,
yep,
but with some considerations that you would have to take into place. It's not not meant to be an arbitrary thing. You'd look at use, you'd look at the existing setbacks and the practicality of, I mean, can you bring 1,000 square foot addition? Does it even look like it ought to go in the front of the building, for example? So anyways, I thought that was important for you to know, because I think that this situation may come up as often as new construction or, you know, a tear down and reconstruction of the site.
Anything else jump out at you from workshop till now that?
But I think Kyle covered it. I
Yeah.
think the service road thing was very important. We we understand that there are a couple of irregularly shaped lots there, so we're trying to go through a lot of detail to explain that, gee, it's an irregularly shaped lot. They can't do this. So how do you explain that? We really simplified that, I think, so I think that's fine now. There was one other thing I wanted to mention that it just escaped me as I was talking here. Let me just look. Oh, Kyle, I think did a good job of explaining that the setback is malleable to the extent that you want to keep the same ratio. That ratio, by the way, I mean, in urban design, it's a pretty well-established standard that this idea of height to length, if you from height of one building, wall of one building to the wall of the other building on the other side, kind of the golden ratio in urban design is a maximum of 1 to 5. So that's why the 1 to 2.5 to the center line, because you don't know what's going on the other side of the road. That 1.5 is a sort of a maximum ratio for the context that we're talking about. And so that's why the incentive is if you go up a foot, you get to step back 2.5 feet farther, up to a maximum of 60 feet, which would allow, as Kyle said, a single row of parking in front if you reach that. And maybe you want to have apartments on the top 2 floors and a retail space on the bottom floor. If you can get up to that 39-foot height, 40-foot height. And there are exceptions, of course, that we try to take into account. So I think Kyle did a good job of explaining all that part of it.
Yes, very good. Thank you. Any other questions from the board? I mean, it was a tough read the first time. I do think they've simplified it quite a bit for both applicants that might come before the town and staff. Yes, Mike?
Just going on that service road bit a bit.
Yeah.
It's not too confusing. The service road is not necessarily going to be there right away, but someone that wants to develop the land has to know that the likelihood of a service road would be going through 2 pieces of property,
Yep.
even though at the time it's not there. So they can't come back and say, no, we don't want the service road there. Did I get?
Yeah, I think we're always trying to provide that connectivity.
Even if it's
Yeah.
not already connected.
Yeah.
Right, you're planning for the potential option of it.
So someone that builds has to know that this portion is going to be a service road or something, possibly, even though it's not currently there. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Other comments from the board? Comments from the public based on what you heard? Yeah, please, can you step up to the mic? That would be great, if you would.
Hi, I'm Chris Sater, and I live at 20 Hillside Road, Orono. I'm receiving a postcard in regards to this evening. That's why I came, because I received that postcard that I was a butter or close to this. I guess my question would be the service roads. Are they restricted to any new development that goes on to Park? Or are they also being considered for already existing roads and into older neighborhoods in the area? Since I got the postcard, I don't know.
Yeah, good question.
The transportation management plan that the town commissioned, and it's available. Kyle, do you know if it's online?
I believe so.
We should probably make sure it was carried out jointly by town manager's office and public works, and we participated. Anyways, the idea of a service road or a connecting road all the way from, the area of the reserve and the condominiums to the north, all the way through really to Orchard Trails Drive is a key concept. Whether it can ever be done physically because of ownership and established uses and so forth is another question. But in concept, it's there. And we know that there are increments of it that can be built. The development that's been approved by the planning board 2.5 years ago, probably now, but not yet built, called the Edge at Orchard Trails, another student-oriented development that would be adjacent to Orchard Trails was a cluster development that in fact includes exactly such a crossroad, all the way with all the legal easements and so forth in place. So it's just a matter of having the project built. And when it is built, there will be a crossroad from Orchard Trails Drive to Washburn. And so that's a big piece of connectivity. And if and when that is built, there are some other options to further connect and move some of the student traffic off of Park Street and right directly into the roundabout. It will take negotiations, it will take money, it'll take resources and willingness and all of that stuff. But you know, it's a tangible possibility. It's not a dream.
I have a hunch because I live in the same neighborhood that she might be talking about the Webster neighborhood. I don't think there's any possibility from my assessment that the
No.
Webster neighborhood could ever be connected because of Orchard Trails and the land the way it is.
I think that's right.
Yeah,
I think
I
that's
don't see
right. You know, I do think that part of the roundabout at Park Street, part of the purpose of that was to give a Webster neighborhood residents an opportunity to get out onto Park Street easier, more or less by using that roundabout as a slingshot back into downtown. And so that roundabout takes care of some of the issues, not all. It makes some of the issues a little more challenging, but takes care of a lot of other issues. And so the transportation management plan that Kyle referred to when he was talking about that purpose of complete street goes into great detail with lots of design in it. And I know the town council and town manager and public works director will incrementally begin implementing that as they are able to find the resources.
Could you just give a quick summary just so people know? I mean, we've had the traffic study by T.Y. Lin. I understand. I attended one a while ago because I got the same postcard. There have been some, was it just workshops or whatever was held with the Park Street corridor? So there's been some public meetings. I don't know if there's any more planned just for.
I don't think any more are planned.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean that somebody couldn't request it, but during the transportation management plan process, there were a series, I think, of 3 public meetings at different stages along the way, or either two or three, plus a series of advisory committee meetings, which included neighborhood and business representatives. And then Kyle conducted a public hearing just before the workshop with the planning board, Kyle.
Okay.
Which every property owner was in the C2 district at least was notified. We had a modest attendance, all residents from the Webster neighborhood, as it turned out. And so there's been all that. And then, of course, the hearing process here and before the council.
Yeah. So after, well, depending on what we do today, it goes on to council and then there'll be another public hearing.
Correct.
Thank you. Any more questions before I close? Please, please step up. Came to the meeting, you might as well say something.
Yeah, because I don't know much about it. Chris Sater, 20 Hillside Road again. I'm sorry, I didn't understand what is it the one already built at the university?
Yes.
The roundabout you were speaking of?
Yes, that's the one that serves as the kind of the slingshot for Webster neighborhood folks, so they can turn right. Now, if you're coming out of the neighborhood, instead of having to turn left, you can still turn left, but you can turn right and go around and come back.
Yeah, okay.
The plan also calls for potentially a second roundabout at the northern end, so that all the apartment dwellers between Rangeley Road and Old Town can simply turn right and come around like that. That's not necessarily the preferred option, but it's a good option in combination with a couple of other possibilities that the transportation plan talks about.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any more questions before I close it up? All right, public hearing is closed. Any more questions, comments from the board? All right, so they've made a bunch of changes. I don't know, based on your most recent review, whether you have any more. I did not happen to come up with any. So if that's the case and no more comments, I think we're ready for a motion on what we're going to do with the proposed amendments.
Two things.
Yep.
You haven't called me up if I was voting tonight yet.
Okay.
Secondly, I'm in a butter, but
Okay.
I don't mind voting.
Question for you. How many voting members do we have here?
6.
Okay, so we don't, Mike does not need to be, yeah. Okay. Thank you for mentioning that. Yep.
Do,
All right.
Full board would be 7.
Okay.
Right.
So,
But a quorum's only 4.
Yes, but if any of them, if any of them,
I got you. So Mike, we'll allow you to vote. Here, I've got a question for you. And usually this is how we address this if a board member has a potential conflict. Do you think because you're in a butter that you think there's any bias, or do you think you can act or vote on this matter without any issues?
I have no issues, no bias.
I have a question for the board members. Do any of you have any problem with Mike voting on this issue? All right. So we got a full board, so I need a motion, please.
do we need to do each one of these separately? These amendments or?
So I would think usually what we would do is just pretty much
Read
repeat
this.
the new business.
Mhm.
Just, I move that we approve the proposed land use.
Okay.
And then I'd probably just read the whole rest of that.
Okay. Should I make that motion?
Please do.
I move that we accept the proposed land use ordinance amendment to sections 18-128, 18-126, 18-31, 18-127, 18-168, 18-169, 18-177, 18-206, 18-210, and 18-106 to implement standards for parcels located in the C2 district with frontage along Park Street, as well as better aligning several traffic and access management standards with those of the Maine Department of Transportation.
Very good. We have a motion. Can I have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor? Very good. Just quick question. When would this go before the council if people want to go to that meeting? How quickly would this be
The
processed?
the January council meeting, which is January 14th.
Okay. So there is another option. If those of you get another postcard and want to go to another meeting, there'll be one in January. Very good. Thank you, Evan and Kyle. Next up on our agenda is a site plan review request by David Ryan and Matthew Enman, who wish to operate a disc golf course on their lot located at the corner of I-95 northbound off-ramp and Kelly Road, tax map 30-0, lot 11 in the EEZ zone. Can I have a representative of the applicant or the applicant step up and tell us about your project?
Hi, I'm Ryan Edmond. My brother David and my son Matthew, we looking to put a disc golf course in at that location, and you have a plan that was submitted. We are looking to get moving as soon as we possibly can as the weather goes. We're hoping to have started sooner, but we had a lot of tree damage in our Orrington course. If you've been over there, we had 200 big trees down. So it took us a while to get back on track. So the windstorm last year hit us pretty hard. So hopefully you can see what's in the package here, what we're looking to put in, and hopefully it meets your specifications.
Very good. Thank you. And Kyle, you also provided us a summary. You've been working with the applicant. Can you also add anything to what we were just told? Any issues, anything you saw during the
Sure.
review
so-
process?
So the applicant said it's a proposed disc golf course, so largely the area will be comprised of the course itself, which is relatively minimal clearance of the vegetation there. As far as the developed area, there is this parking lot area with two small structures. I believe there's a small clubhouse and utility shed that total, I think, around 800 and some square feet, 872 square feet. I think the total disturbed area, including the parking and the drainage and everything with 37,000 square feet. So under that 1 acre kind of trigger that would bring in Department of Environmental Protection, permitting, and things of that nature. I think the unique thing about this project has been the parking surface material. In our ordinance, I mentioned this in the traffic and parking section of the report. Our ordinance, section 18-135, states all parking areas, driveways, and other areas serving 10 or more vehicles shall be paved with bituminous concrete or an equivalent surfacing. That took some discussion amongst staff, I think, because traditionally that has just been viewed as if a lot is over 10 spaces, it's paved. So we had a lot of discussion over what that equivalent surfacing meant. So we looked at a number of factors, the fact that the applicant is not proposing to be operational during winter months. So the parking lot doesn't really have a need to be plowed. The fact that this is a lot in this area that isn't surrounded by as much development as a parking lot in the Commercial 1 district or downtown. So taking into consideration the kind of visual aesthetic of that area, and also taking into consideration drainage concerns. And so the applicant proposed this kind of vegetated parking surface, which should have seen kind of some graphic example of in the report or in the application. When all is said and done, talking to the Public Works Department, the town engineer, we felt that with the maintenance plan in place that the applicant provided and all these other factors, that it functionally meant that equivalent surfacing standard. So that was kind of the most unique and biggest hurdle to overcome throughout the process, I think. Other than that, there seem to be few issues. MDOT does have standards generally as far as setbacks from interstate ramps. However, since this is in our urban compact area, their standards don't apply. We should have received an email correspondence where I raised that question, and they provided some assurance that with this level of development and the project in question, that queuing and build up on the interstate ramp wouldn't necessarily be an issue in this case. So not as big of an issue as perhaps a larger scale development. I think those were the main concerns, though, while reviewing.
Very good. Thank you, Kyle. Before I open it up for the public hearing, I do want to invite some comments from the board. I'm going to kick off with one because, the alternative parking, essentially I had no issues with that. Just reminding the board during our comp plan discussions when we were talking about just innovative solutions, considering low impact development type of approaches and what's presented here. One thing that I looked at was this appears to be going to the headwaters of Johnny Mac Brook, just down the hill there. And that is one of the areas we want to protect, and fairly close proximity to that wetland, which I think forms the headwaters, if I'm not mistaken, if I remember back. And, this is a low impact development approach. So that's a good thing as far as receiving waters down the hill. So I thought that was pretty innovative. Curious to see how it works, but so, nice idea. Glad the staff was flexible in that.
Yeah. And also
I
speaking this.
I like the idea too.
Yep.
And I think it's great, but I would think that when we make our conditions of approval, that if this turns out not to work out as expected and turns into a muddy field or something that, is clearly not working the way it was supposed to, that maybe then they need to pave it.
Mhm.
That, that would be, I would see that as a condition of approval, that we hope it's going to work, we're really for it, but if it doesn't, something needs to be done to fix it.
Good question. So I'm curious, and you must have had that discussion with during your review with Public Works that.
Right. So I tried to address this in the third recommendation in
Yep.
the report. I didn't use the language of having to come back and have it paved, kind of
Yep.
leaving open the
Yeah.
possibility of other issues and other solutions being
Mhm.
available. But that was the aim of that. If different language needed to be used, I think that's. But yeah, I think in speaking to Public Works and the town engineer, they felt similarly. If it didn't work for some reason, that there should be some mechanism in place, like you said, to.
Right. I would think the applicant would have some burden too if it turned into a mud pit, that would probably detract from their business.
Right. And one of the changes made to the project kind of along the way was this paved apron portion between the street and the parking area. That was something the applicant added in to kind of relieve any mud getting transferred onto the street.
Could you just point out to the board, I just want to be clear on what is paved?
Randy from Carpenter Associates, and recommendation back from either the town engineer or Public Works was, in order to make sure we don't track anything out on the Kelly Road, let's pave that first piece of the entrance road.
Okay.
It's fairly steep, and that'll give people a chance to sit there and not track anything
Just-
if there is a problem.
Just up a little bit. Yeah. Okay. Just, yep. Very good. Yep.
One other thing worth noting is that the way this is rated, that all runoff will go through this pond.
Mhm.
So if there is a muddy situation, it'll be here, it'll plug the filter, and you are in a zone where this has to be reviewed annually. If that's not working, that's fairly expensive to fix every year. So I think the applicant wants this to work as well. So.
Okay. Thank you. Other questions?
Yeah, I have a question. If for whatever reason you end up wanting to do something with this property in the winter, and so plowing all of a sudden becomes an issue, would you have to come back to the planning board to talk about that with us, or how would that work?
For usage, I'm not sure that would have to come back. That's an interesting question. Right now, there's no proposal.
Right.
So change of use. I think if they added uses, so if this turned into something more than a Frisbee
Like, for
golf
instance,
course, that's
they-
what we're approving. But if there was a substantial change that required winter operation, they would have to come back, correct?
So you could make that a condition of approval. That
Okay.
if there was some.
Yeah, I'm always looking for ski trails. So, for instance.
Yeah, if there was some change in winter usage, then that could be.
Other comments? I do have one, and just because it's kind of what I do. So we talked about the maintenance plan that was submitted. So it does talk about number 8, and you just mentioned it, Randy, when you were talking about it. It says this is an MS4 area and requires that an annual environmental review be completed by a third party. And the purpose of that review is to make sure everything's working as intended. My understanding is that this project is less than an acre, so that doesn't fall into the MS4 issue, and it also doesn't drain directly to the town's MS4, so you're exempt in that regard. So not that I wouldn't mind a frequent check that you've got to do this every year, but this, and based on my knowledge, doesn't kick you in to any MS4 compliance. If your stormwater system drained to the town, the town's ditch, but it all drains downhill and it goes directly to the water body. So that's just one item. Yeah, it would make sense to make sure that underdrain soil filter is working. So if Krista's point, you get a lot of erosion, it's going to clog up your filter. And then my comment about Johnny Mack Brook and preserving that goes out the window. So I mean, that's just common sense. Your stormwater system isn't going to work unless you maintain it. But the MS4 comment is not actually necessary. So Do you agree with that?
Right. And so I think that, again, a condition agreement essentially doing the same thing would have to be made to make that part of the maintenance plan.
Right. I mean, because that's
Otherwise,
drained to Johnny Mac Brook. I think that we've identified that as a critical area in town. So even if they don't have to submit a report to the town for MS4, we still need to make sure the thing's working. So I'm not quite sure that is a condition or a recommendation, how we go about that, but I just wanted to bring that to everybody's attention. Yes. What do you say, Evan?
Sorry to do this, but it doesn't actually drain the Johnny Mac Brook. It does, it's an important part of it, the drainage, but
That was the headwaters.
Yeah, but headwaters is up here, Forest, on Forest
Okay,
Ave, near
all
the
right, yeah.
Forest Ave roundabout, and Johnny Mac Brook comes down through Sailor Development
Okay,
and
thank you.
down. We're talking about here, and this, this probably drains in part that way, in part probably, the 95 probably split that
Yeah.
drainage, and this is all kind of the very edge of probably the Caribou Bog system,
Okay, yeah.
which ultimately drains that way en route to Bushaw Lake if it ever gets there. But there may be a divide here, I don't know, because there's other drainage systems like Johnny Mac Brook that come down here, a couple unnamed streams down to the Penobscot.
I was just thinking back from our comp plan days, and it just stuck in my head. There's a
Yeah,
whole-
it doesn't, I mean,
the whole bog
it doesn't
is-
invalidate your
Yeah.
your thought and what the comprehensive plan was saying in terms of low impact development. I just didn't want you to,
Yep. Thank you.
on the record, justify it as Johnny Mac Brook.
Very good. Thanks. Appreciate that. All right, other questions? There was a couple things, just looking at your maintenance list. So, I mean, pretty aggressive. Repair all eroded areas immediately, compacted to 95%. That's a big commitment to have the compaction equipment and everything ready to go. But if you want to put that in there, great. Inspect and clean the under drain soil filter in number 7. I was just curious on how often you thought that needed to be done. You talked about rototill or replace the top 12 to 18 inches after 5 to 10 years, but I was just curious, what was your idea on inspecting that under drain soil filter to make sure it's functioning?
Usually it's annually or after any large rainstorm.
Yep.
Whatever that definition is.
Yeah, so I guess if you could just clarify what you meant there, that would be appreciated. And just a question, jute mesh will be applied to all slopes greater than 3 to 1. I just, without really going through all the contours, do you have a lot of slopes greater than 3 to 1 on that site?
We do not
Can
at
you-
this time.
Sorry.
We do not, but it's a pretty standard note that we put on in case
Yep.
we're not always in control of construction. So they decide to steepen some slopes,
I get you.
we require stabilization.
Got it. Any other comments, questions?
Yeah, I am interested in the landscaping.
Mhm.
And under the proposed conditions, we have the applicant will provide the town with a sketch and letter showing the 10-foot wide landscape buffer strip between the parking lot and Kelly Road. And we don't have a landscape plan that came with this. So I don't have a real good feeling for what's already there, but when you plan your strip there, it would be good if you have healthy shrubs and trees already there to incorporate them into the plan rather than remove them and, then plant new trees that are much smaller than the ones that were already there. It's a matter of whether you have anything that's good to look at. If it's all bad, scrubby stuff, by all means, take it out. But if it's not, sort of include what's already there.
Yeah, it's a fairly well wooded lot currently, and our plan is to keep it natural as is. So we felt the 60 feet that's already there would more than meet the 10-foot buffer requirement.
Okay. So that will be clarified as a condition of approval.
If you wish to make that a
Right,
condition,
so you
that's fine.
just need to
Yeah.
state that.
Yeah,
That will be on
absolutely.
the record.
Yeah.
Good.
Okay. And then also you're planning to plant trees in the parking lot? You should tell us what you're planning to plant there.
Just to designate the end of rows, I believe. Yep.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, we, there's, there, in your ordinance, you have a requirement to have a certain number of plantings to define basically the islands and the parking. So what we did, and there's a ratio of 3 per 100. I forget the number.
Spaces.
Um,
I think it's 1 for 20 spaces.
Okay, 1 per 20 spaces. We have about 50 or 60. So 3 would do the trick, and I think we put in 5 or 6, one of each planted end of islands. So we're open to suggestions on the species. We didn't specify the species, just a shade tree.
A lot of different species out there. Probably no other place in Orono, some trees we have out there. There's vines.
I apologize. We do need, I mean, we are recording this, so comments, please, into the speaker. I've let a little bit go, but just help me out. So
Okay.
other questions? I could open this up
Can
to,
we just
Yep.
the question was, can we suggest anything? Trees are really tricky these days. We have lots of lovely ash trees in town, and suddenly we're threatened with the emerald ash borer, and they're all going to go away. It's been one thing after another. But right now, I don't know of anything that's after red maples, and they grow really well. So maybe that's something to consider. And they have good fall color.
thanks. I'm going to open up the public hearing and invite anybody from the audience to step up and talk to us about your comments or concerns.
I put that in the wrong place, but I'm tall enough to be able to see over the top of it. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Dave Mylan, and I'm the Director of Community Development. I just wanted to make a couple of comments regarding the application and kind of support of what I was hearing from board members as well. The two things I wanted to comment on is staff met with this applicant, and we've and really this was a very interesting opportunity to look at alternatives and really kind of thinking outside the box of how we might be able to have a parking lot that met their needs, but also met the needs of the community as far as stormwater containment and such. So when we asked them to come up with an idea about this, one of the first things that we heard from them was that that this facility wouldn't be used in the winter at all. So therefore, it didn't need to be it didn't need to be plowed, et cetera, and this wouldn't have the impact. We commented to them at the time that we would certainly, recommend to the board that a condition be that the facility be conditional, that it not be used when there's snow on the ground. So we would certainly support that if that's the board's decision. We had light conversations. Secondly is the need for an annual inspection. The idea is that even though it's not required under the MS4 application, we still would require an annual report to the town on the inspection of that systems on an annual basis. I would like to encourage that as a recommendation. The idea is that in 3 or 4, 5 years, whatever it takes, once we get an idea of how it's actually working, if the applicant feels that it's no longer necessary to do an annual one, or that it be done every 5 years or whatever, that the idea was they could come back to the planning board and ask for that to be amended and changed. So we would certainly support those ideas. So we certainly appreciate the comments by members as well. Prepared to answer any questions if I have any. If not, I'll sit down and shut up.
Thank you. All right. Public hearing's open. Anybody want to step up? All right. I'm going to close the public hearing then. Remaining comments from the board?
Curious. winter is different from time to time, so would you be locking yourself out of some great business opportunity by saying you're not gonna be open in the winter?
Not sure.
At this point, we don't know.
I never thought I'd be golfing in November.
Yeah, and I was thinking, sitting here going, well, we could have that October storm, and now we got a parking lot. I guess we'll shovel it. Right? If can't plow it, but we could probably get enough to. I don't know. That would be a unique situation, I guess. Like in Orrington, excuse me, where wintertime, people still go out there and play. We're not open, but they still go play, and we allow it. But that would be different here, so we'd have to block the road off, I guess, because people would want to probably go out and play, so we'd have to chain it off. And that's right now. Big reason we intended originally that we go, let's put this paved parking lot. So I'm thinking, so here we have this outdoor, low impact recreational sport. We have this great big parking lot paved sitting there. It doesn't really seem to go together to me. And I know that's part of the zone. And we had talked, I'm not sure if it would have been part of other zones, if we looked at other things when we went through that process, but that was we understood that when we put it in there. It just didn't seem to match with what we were wanting to do. And it would also increase the cost of playing around a disc golf significantly if we've got to try to recoup some money from a very expensive parking lot that would have to go in there. And this would save on costs a great deal by putting a different type of surface on there.
So again, you heard that one of the concerns was, again, if your operation changes, there is a proposed recommendation that says the business will not operate during winter months and will not be operational during snow events. So to make sure that no plowing of the parking lot takes place. So that does cover a good chunk of the.
So it would say anything that if we had to plow, then we can't open, is what it says.
Yeah.
If you can drive on it without plowing, then we're open, I guess.
It says it will not operate during winter months, which I don't know if we have a definition of that. I mean, if you get a warm spell, global warming happens a little sooner than we expect, maybe.
So what I meant by that was the kind of traditional December 21st to the actual period of winter.
Okay.
And then outside of that, you get these random, snow events that would be those certain events where those individual times wouldn't be operational either. If that snow cleared a week later and it still wasn't that winter period, then it could resume operation. That was my.
So historically, have you ever operated your Orrington facility during?
We have, in Orrington, we close, on paper Christmas Eve. This year we've been closed for a month already this year, right? So, I suppose you could have a time when we didn't. You had a. There was people out playing in last weekend because it was 45 degrees there. So
does snow dictate your operation?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Very good question. Other questions? I mean, I like the innovative approach, and I think that's a good thing for Orono. Just hope it works.
One other thing to possibly consider in the winter is if we have freezing and thawing events and maybe a nice rainstorm in the middle of it all, there's the possibility for ice action in that parking lot, even if there isn't any snow. So you might want to have it closed during the winter, even if.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like you can only plow tar. Is that what I'm hearing? So if any surface other than tar can't be plowed? Is that what?
Well, it seems to be the whole premise of why you went with the alternative surface. So if you start changing things up, I think you've heard pretty clearly you'll be back here.
Yeah, we're not asking to. If it turns out that it's going to be to our benefit to pave it and be open all year round, we'll be back.
Okay.
Okay.
People comfortable with that? Yeah. Given, I mean, Ryan, I'm sorry, Kyle covered this, that the business will not operate. That number 4, I think, kind of covers this. Anything else? Public hearing is closed. Any more questions? All right, I think we're ready for a motion.
Do we want to add anything about the annual inspection?
There's a couple things that I noted that we might add. So, I mean, the annual inspection, I think, is part of the application. It's part of the maintenance plan. So I'm not, because my comment was that it might be removed, but based on what Dave said, that I agree with that. I think it'd be better to have a little bit more accountability. So I think that stays in. So I don't know if we need a new recommendation. The only thing I asked for a couple clarifications on the maintenance plan, although that might be taken care of too, because Dave said you're going to do an annual report to the town for the short term, which means you better inspect it, or you've got to inspect it on an annual basis. So maybe my maintenance item clarification isn't even necessary because they're going to report to the town. I think those go hand in hand. So scratch that one off the list. So I don't think we need to confuse this. So I don't know that we have any more other than Kyle's recommendations. What do you think, everybody? We okay?
I think he has it covered.
All right, there we go. You're up.
I gotta find what I gotta do. All right. I move that we approve the site plan for Dr. Disc Golf that was put forward by David Ryan and Matthew Enman. Location is Kelly Road, tax map 30, lot 11. It's an economic development zone. It has 37.3 acres. And the applicant requests site plan approval to operate a disc golf course in a commercial recreational facility use. Did I get that
Very
right?
good. We have a motion. Can I have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? Think we're good? Actually, there was a proposed findings of fact before we vote. Isn't that correct? That I missed? Whew, it was close. So in the review packet, just before we get too far, we did just before we vote, thank you, but I gotta stall for a second. We received lots of supporting information. Town engineer, Joe Madigan, wastewater. We've got DOT, but the last page is proposed findings of fact. So I need to read these in the record before we take a formal vote. Okay? So we'll backtrack a little bit. Sorry for that, but I forgot. This is proposed findings of fact. Obviously, welcome to comments or edits for Dr. Disc Golf for the site plan review dated December 19th, 2018. Pursuant to Article 6, Section 18-177 of the Orono Code of Ordinances, the Orono Planning Board has considered the application of David, Ryan, and Matthew Enman for the construction of Dr. Disc Golf located at tax map 30, lot 11 in the Economic Development Zone District, and based on all evidence presented by the applicant, reviewing agencies, town departments, and the public found the following. Number one, requirements of the district that the proposed construction of the use is an allowable use in the Economic Development Zone District and will be located on a legally conforming parcel in a manner such that the construction meets the requirements of the district. Are there any issues with? Hearing none. Number two, compliance with town ordinances and codes that the proposed use, structures, setbacks, buffers, and layout meet the provisions of applicable regulations of the town, including all pertinent sections of Chapter 18 Land Use Ordinance. Any issues there? Hearing none. Number three, utilization of the site, that this construction is within the natural capabilities of the site, is located in a suitable area of the site, does not disturb environmentally sensitive areas, fits with the existing topography of the site, and can accommodate drainage and traffic associated with the construction. Any issues there? Number four, traffic and pedestrian access, that the applicant has provided adequate and improved access into and out of the site with a two-way driveway on Kelly Road. Traffic generation is within the capacity of the road system to accommodate it, and internal circulation allows for safe movement of vehicles and pedestrians. Any issues, comments there? Hearing none. Number five, storage of materials, that there will be no exposed storage on the site. Comments? Number six, stormwater management, that the increase in impervious area and the flow of the stormwater from the construction can be managed with the use of an underdrain soil filter. Any issues? Number seven, erosion control, that the applicant has provided for erosion control during construction, meeting best management practices. Any issues? Number eight, water supply and sewage disposal, that the use proposes an on-site sewage disposal system that meets the requirements of the subsurface wastewater disposal rules, and the use will use an on-site water supply. Any comments? Number nine, utilities, that the construction will adequately supply electrical service and other utility services to adequately meet the anticipated use of the project. Any issues there? Number 10, natural features, that the site contains 37 acres and less than 1 acre will be disturbed During the construction process, clearing will be restricted to the parking area and only the removal of minimal brush will be done on the disc golf course. Questions, comments? Number 11, groundwater and surface water quality protection, that the site is not within the town's aquifer recharge overlay district, and the construction will not adversely impact either the quality or the quantity of groundwater available to abutting properties or to any public water supply system, and that there will be no discharge of materials to water bodies. Any comments? Number 12, hazardous, special, and radioactive materials, that the use of the site does not involve the handling, storage, or use of hazardous, special, or radioactive materials. Any comments? 13, shoreline relationship, that the proposed recreational facility and parking lot are outside of shoreline zones and are not located within a floodplain as identified by the Federal Emergency Management Agency. Comments? None. 14, solid waste management, that the proposed use will provide for adequate disposal of solid waste. Any issues? 15, historic and archaeological resources, that the site is not known to contain historic or archaeological resources. Any comments? 16, financial capacity, that the applicant has the financial capacity to carry out the project. Any comments? Lastly, number 17, noise and lighting, that the facility will operate within the noise standards in town ordinances, and that the applicant only has need for a couple of security style lights at the clubhouse and utility shed that will not be a nuisance to neighboring properties. Any issues? Very good. Those are read into the record with no comments. We have a pending motion and a second. Yes.
Okay, so I was just made aware that the conditions need to be read in the motion process.
Good point. Good thing somebody's keeping us in line. Lisa, will you turn to the back page and read the recommendations that Kyle has provided as part of the motion?
Number 1, the applicant will submit to the town a letter or sketch showing that the signage will meet the standards for signs listed in Article 5 of the Land Use Ordinance in Section 18-140 before a building permit is issued. Number 2, the applicant will provide the town with a sketch and letter showing the 10-foot wide landscaped buffer strip between the parking lot and Kelly Road before a building permit is issued. Number 3, the applicant will maintain the parking lot surface to avoid any erosion issues. If the current maintenance plan fails to remedy any problem that arises, then the applicant will need to go back to the planning board with a different way in which the issue can be resolved. Number 4, the business will not operate during winter months and will not be operational during snow events, so to make sure that no plowing of the parking lot takes place. Number 5, when providing electrical power to the clubhouse, the applicant will follow the guidelines in Section 18-177 utilities that states new utility lines and facilities must be underground or screened from view. Number 6, if expansion of the parking lot is needed in the future, the applicant will need to provide to the planning board a traffic analysis showing that there is no negative impact to the interstate ramp. And number 7, the applicant will comply with all other local and state ordinances, rules, and regulations.
Thank you, Lisa. So we have a modified motion. I think I'm going to ask for a second to that.
Second.
Again, any further discussion? I think we covered all the bases this time. All those in favor? That is unanimous. Congratulations. I look forward to your success. Next up on the item, the agenda is old business. There is none. Next up, discussion. You guys want to hang out and chat for a while? No? Okay. Next up is adjournment. Can I get a motion?
Make a motion, we adjourn.
Second.
Second. Any discussion? All those in favor? Very good. What do we have on tap for January?
That's what I was just looking at. Looks like we're supposed to meet the 16th if we have anything that comes forward, but I don't know that we have anything.
Okay.
And after the deadlines are gonna be pushed up, so because of the holidays.
Yep.
So I don't think we have anything.
Good job, Kyle. Good job. Thank you for the note.
Oh, you wanna meet that bad?